Why are the first 100 days so critical? What do the first months of a presidency reveal about the next 4 years? The first 100 days of any presidency set the tone for the administration's agenda, strategy, and style. It's the period when momentum is highest and political capital is strongest or wasted. For President Trump returning to the White House after a historic political comeback, the stakes were even higher. Supporters hoped he would move swiftly to finish what he started, while his critics braced for more disruption. Every executive order, policy reversal, and public statement was scrutinized not just for its impact, but for what it signaled about the road ahead. The symbolism of these first 100 days also matters. It's a test of campaign promises versus political reality, and a measure of how much an outsider president could push through an increasingly gridlocked Washington. For Trump, success meant proving that the America First agenda still resonated. Failure risked confirming critics who said his time had passed. The results, unsurprisingly, are complex. We'll break down the wins and losses, the ongoing plans, and what they all objectively mean for Americans, supporters, skeptics, and everyone in between. Where did he move fastest and most effectively? Trump wasted no time signing a flurry of executive orders aimed at demonstrating quick action and the plan to keep his campaign promises. Key among these were energy initiatives to expand drilling and pipelines, border security expansions, and tax relief measures aimed at small businesses. On immigration, he reinstated stricter asylum policies and revamped travel protocols for certain countries. These moves energized his base and drew sharp criticism from progressive groups. Internationally, Trump renegotiated trade talks with allies, moving to replace multilateral agreements with more bilateral deals, which were more focused on favorable terms for the U.S. His stance on China remained tough, signaling continuity with his earlier foreign policy. Domestically, cutting federal regulations across various industries was another major pillar. Proponents argued it unleashed economic growth and freed businesses from bureaucratic red tape. In many ways, Trump's early actions were a clear signal to supporters. This term would be about speed, decisiveness, and his America First policies unapologetically resumed. What obstacles have slowed his momentum? While executive orders made headlines, legislation proved much tougher. Trump's push for a national immigration overhaul, major healthcare reforms, and new tax packages faced stiff resistance, not just from Democrats but also skeptical Republicans. Legal challenges immediately stalled several initiatives. Federal courts blocked or delayed enforcement of new asylum regulations, and lawsuits over environmental rollbacks kept certain industries in legal limbo. Internationally, while Trump's tough rhetoric appealed to some, traditional allies voiced concern about abrupt shifts in diplomacy, complicating negotiations in Europe and Asia. On the domestic front, inflation concerns and interest rate hikes fueled public anxiety about the economy, making sweeping reforms harder to sell to middle-class voters. Early on, Trump's biggest challenge wasn't boldness. It was navigating an even more divided and combative Washington than he faced during his first term. Is America safer since President Trump's inauguration? Or are we more vulnerable after 100 days? One of Trump's most consistent campaign themes was restoring American strength on the world stage, and his second presidency has continued that approach aggressively. He increased defense spending, expanded cybersecurity initiatives, and pushed NATO allies to commit more financially to their collective defense. He also authorized expanded counterterrorism operations abroad, and doubled down on military presence in critical hotspots like the South China Sea and Eastern Europe. However, critics warned that escalating tensions without sufficient diplomatic channels could backfire. Already, early incidents with Iran and North Korea tested the administration's ability to manage crises without them spiraling toward open conflict. Domestically, Trump emphasized securing the southern border not just as an immigration issue, but as a national security imperative by expanding physical barriers and surveillance technologies. While supporters hailed these moves as necessary realism, others warned they risked militarizing American foreign policy and thus reducing America's soft power influence globally. What are the biggest long-term goals that are already underway? Trump's second term focuses heavily on institutional overhaul. His team is moving to reshape the civil service by loosening protections for federal employees, making it easier to remove bureaucrats who are seen as obstacles to executive policy. He also launched a major push toward energy independence, aiming to supercharge oil, gas, and nuclear production to reduce U.S. reliance on foreign energy by historic margins. Education reform is also on the agenda with efforts to promote school choice, charter expansion, and a rollback of federal oversight in favor of local control. On immigration, Trump envisions completing a southern border barrier and revising legal immigration standards. The new standards would prioritize merit-based entry over family reunification entry models. Finally, Trump continues pushing the idea of deglobalization by favoring reshoring industries, tightening trade with adversaries, and enhancing American self-sufficiency across all possible sectors. Is Trump winning more hearts and minds after 100 days? Or is he simply hardening the same old divides? Polls show a deeply polarized reaction to Trump's first 100 days in office. His core base remains fiercely loyal, and often cite his taking decisive action as proof of his leadership. They contrast Trump's leadership with the inaction of career politicians. However, independent voters remain split. Some appreciate Trump's economic moves and border policies, while others express concern over his rhetoric, divisiveness, and perceived instability in diplomatic channels. Meanwhile, young voters and urban centers remain skeptical or openly hostile, both continuing trends that were seen during Trump's previous campaigns and first term as president. Mainstream media coverage has remained very critical as well, while conservative outlets have largely framed Trump's return as a restoration of common-sense leadership. Overall, Trump's early performance has reinforced political camps rather than reshuffling them, setting the stage for a highly combative political environment moving forward. Has coverage been fair, or does bias shape the narrative? Mainstream media outlets have largely portrayed Trump's return as chaotic, controversial, and polarizing. Headlines often emphasize administrative turbulence, controversial statements, and challenges to democratic norms. Conversely, conservative and alternative media celebrate Trump's actions as bold, necessary corrections to perceived elite overreach. They highlight achievements in deregulation, trade renegotiation, and border security. This polarized media environment means that many Americans experience two entirely different versions of reality, depending on where they get their news. The gap between pro- and anti-Trump narratives seems wider now than at any point during his first term. Social media platforms like X, formerly Twitter, YouTube, and Rumble have further amplified echo chambers. Viral clips often showcase only the most extreme or inflammatory moments, reinforcing biases. This bifurcated media lens makes it harder to assess Trump's actual performance objectively, raising urgent questions about the role of media in democracy itself. How has the economic landscape shifted under his leadership? Trump's focus on deregulation, tax cuts for small businesses, and energy sector expansion has generated optimism in some markets. The stock market responded with short-term gains, especially in industries like energy, manufacturing, and defense. However, concerns about inflation, debt ceilings, and the global economy weighed heavily. Economic inequality remains high, and critics argue that policies favoring corporations could exacerbate the divide between wealthy and working-class Americans. The energy boom promised lower gas prices and more jobs, but critics warn about environmental costs and global instability in energy markets. Tariff policies and ongoing trade disputes, particularly with China and the EU, has created uncertainty for farmers, tech companies, and supply chains already strained from global disruptions. Overall, Trump's economic strategy remains a high-risk, high-reward gamble, one that energizes his base while fueling anxiety among economists and moderates alike. Are lawsuits, investigations, and controversies already impacting Trump's second term? While Trump made headlines for policy moves and executive orders, legal and ethical storms continued to brew underneath. Ongoing investigations into election conduct, business dealings, and personal financial disclosures have not disappeared and may even have intensified. State-level prosecutors, federal inquiries, and independent watchdogs have continued cases that began before Trump returned to office. Each legal battle threatens to distract from his agenda, drain political capital, and galvanize opposition forces. Ethical concerns also loom. Critics point to potential conflicts of interest involving Trump's business empire and government decisions, raising questions about transparency, favoritism, and corruption. Even among supporters, there is a growing awareness that ongoing scandals, whether proven or simply perceived, could overshadow policy wins, making re-election or sustained political influence harder to maintain. The legal and ethical fallout isn't just background noise. It's a shadow hanging over Trump's second presidency, and how he manages it could define whether his term ends in triumph or controversy. What does Trump's first 100 days reveal about his second term? Is Trump building a legacy or courting political collapse? Trump's first 100 days back in power have been defined by aggressive action, deep division, and undeniable controversy. He moved quickly to fulfill core promises: deregulation, border security, energy expansion, and reviving nationalist trade policies. Yet alongside clear wins, challenges piled up. Legislative gridlock, court interventions, diplomatic tensions, and unresolved legal battles have complicated Trump's ambitions, threatening to sap momentum before major structural reforms can take hold. The American public remains split, some inspired by a return to forceful leadership, others alarmed by the polarizing rhetoric and the risks of institutional damage. Independent voters in particular may ultimately decide whether Trump's gamble succeeds. Economically, the picture is mixed. Certain sectors thrive under deregulation and energy surges, but inflation, global instability, and inequality continue to worry economists and working-class families alike. In the end, Trump's early actions show a president eager to leave a lasting impact, but whether history records it as a revitalization or a self-inflicted wound will depend on how he navigates the growing fallout in the months ahead. So what do you think? Are Trump's early moves helping America or setting it up for bigger trouble? Let us know down in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell if you found this analysis valuable. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.